Hey everybody, what's going on? My name is Jamie Dean and welcome to this week's gaming pickups video here on Sidescrollin. And boy, it is a big one this week because not only do I have two Grail games to show you that I managed to come across this week, but you might have seen on the channel lately some videos going up with Scott here in the game room in person, and that's because he came up to visit me from the other side of the country for a week and we had a really good time. One of the days he was here, we went out game hunting. You might have seen that video as well. And we had a really good time. We managed to find some really good stuff. Nothing that, blew our heads off, amazing, super rare or anything like that. But it was an enjoyable day out and what I would call a successful day's hunting. Well, the very day after I dropped Scott back to the airport, I walked into a secondhand store and stumbled into some absolute gold. I'm talking about some of the most valuable games I've ever come across in my entire life in a secondhand store. It was crazy, and that was less than 24 hours after Scott left the state. So, Scotty, if you're watching, this one's for you, buddy. Alright, let's kick it off with some gifts, which seems kind of cruel to start there, given what I'm going to show you later, that Scott missed out on, because the gifts are actually from Scott. Ironic, but anyway. So Scott brought me some presents when he came up to visit, which is absolutely lovely of him, and I'll show you what he brought me. Some of them are 2 DVD box sets, and they are Dragon Ball Z Movie Collection 3 and Dragon Ball Z Movie Collection 5. So these are movies that I was chasing. I'd love to try and accumulate all of the Dragon Ball Z movies. So Scott had these, he didn't want them anymore, and when he knew that I was looking for them, because I'm trying to put together a little bit of a Dragon Ball Z DVD collection, he was happy to part with them and move them on to a home here in the game room. So these come with BoJack Unbound, Broly the Legendary Super Saiyan, and Super Android 13 in Movie Pack 3, and The History of Trunks, Bardock the Father of Goku, and Wrath of the Dragon in Movie Pack 5. So there are 6 Dragon Ball Z movies, some absolute bangers in there. History of Trunks, that's an absolute classic. Bardock's an absolute classic. Broly, of course, arguably the best Dragon Ball Z movie that's been made. So yeah, really happy to have them on the shelf. Thank you very much, Scotty. That was gift number 1 and 2. He also gave me a third gift, and this is one of my Grail games that I've been looking for. And there's a funny story behind this one. So this is, I'll just show you what it is. It is Soul Calibur 2 for the GameCube. Now, the funny story behind this game is that this is actually my Soul Calibur 2 on the GameCube. This is my original copy that I had back in the day. And I actually gifted it to Scott many years ago when I was clearing out my game collection at the time. And he has held onto it all this time, all these years. It must be a decade at least or so. And now he's given it back to me when he saw that it was on my Grail Games list. When he moved in with his partner, she already had a copy of Soul Calibur 2, so he ended up with a duplicate, and we just thought it'd be cool to have my original copy back on the shelf in the collection, which I think is probably one of the only games on the shelf that I originally owned. I think there's only Ocarina of Time, Enter the Matrix on GameCube, and this, if we're talking about sort of Wii era stuff. So yeah, I was wrapped in that, really chuffed. I couldn't believe he still had it. I'd forgotten that I gave it to him in the first place. So when he sent me a photo and said, hey, look what I've got, would you like it? I couldn't quite believe it. And when he said, that's actually your copy, I was like, what? So yeah, really, really chuffed to have that one. Thank you so much, Scotty. Really appreciate it. And it will find a home on the shelf. It's not in the best condition. It's a little bit banged up. You can see there's like a bit of a tear on the case there. But as far as internals go, Scotty's taken very good care of it because it is all looking absolutely lovely and immaculate. It's just that that little front cover issue there, but you know, maybe I could switch cases if I find another case. Perhaps I'm not too that, you know, I'm not fussed about it because, like I said, it's my copy, which is it's just funny how sometimes these things happen, isn't it? You know, really, really weird the way some of these things end up boomeranging. But yeah, there we go. Soul Calibur 2, which we can cross off the Grail list now. And happily put on the shelf because, yeah, what a game. Absolute cracker of a game. It's not a terribly difficult game to find. I was just trying to find it for a price that I felt was reasonable. And so far I hadn't, but I mean, free is more than reasonable. So, yeah, scored. Bargain. All right, so that is the gifts from Scott. Let's move into my secondhand store finds, and then after that I've got one eBay find to share with you as well. But there is quite a bit here to go through because, man, I couldn't quite believe what I walked in on when I walked into that store. So I actually didn't go in there to go game hunting. I went in there just to have a look because I had 10 minutes spare after I'd run some errands, and I hadn't been into this particular store for a while. I didn't even know they carried video games or DVDs or any kind of technology. It's mostly like a clothing and bric-a-brac kind of store. So I went in there just to have a poke around. And on the shelf, they had like a couple of games, you know, they had a very few DVDs and just one or two or three games like The Sims and like an iToy game from the PlayStation. And I'd never seen games in there before. I'd been going there for years, but I don't know, never thought to ask, never thought to look really. So when I saw them, I was like, oh, I've never seen games in here. So I asked the ladies behind the counter, hey, do you guys have these come through very often at all? Like, do you have any more around? And she says, yeah, actually, I've got a whole box out the back. I'll just go and grab it for you. When she brought this box out, wow, it was full of just Xbox gold, like some of the just rarest, most valuable games on that system. And I couldn't quite believe what I was looking at, that someone had obviously not really understood the value of what they had and just all, you know, chucked their Xbox collection into a box and dumped it in this charity store bin. For it to turn up there was, yeah, just unreal. Like, it's one of those just right place, right time kind of moments. So I had a really, really good look through. They were very patient while I went through them all. There was a lot there that I didn't grab, that I didn't want, that either because it wasn't terribly valuable or I didn't want it for my collection. You know, I'm not really collecting original Xbox. I owned an original Xbox, but I didn't own very many games for it. I think Halo might have been one of the only games I ever had on the original Xbox. But I do know that Scott is collecting, which makes him missing out on this even more heartbreaking, because he does have some games he's searching for to complete sets and subsets on the Xbox. But yeah, let's go through what I found in that box of games that they had. I'll start at the probably least interesting and least valuable, and we'll work our way through to some like absolute fucking jaw droppers. Anyway, so the first thing that happened was there were a bunch of like, not a bunch, they had a few like manuals, just loose manuals in the box, none of which I thought were, you know, super interesting or valuable or anything like that. They didn't know a lot about, you know, video games, as a lot of these charity store staff don't. And so, you know, I just sort of told them what they were, showed them where they go, pointed out that, like, you know, these aren't books that you can sort of put in the novel section of the store. These are actually like manuals that go in video games, but they don't have their video games, so they're not, you know, terribly valuable just on their own. It's unlikely anybody's going to pay money for them. And so they said, well, just take what you want then, you know, How would you like? So I took 3 of the books there that they had, the little manuals. The first one was like a strange sort of double manual. So it must have been for a double pack on the Xbox that I hadn't seen before. So it's like a double-sided manual. One side's for one game, the other side's for the other. The first side there is for Sega GT 2002. But the far more interesting side is the other side, Jet Set Radio Future. So again, this must have been a double pack of these games to have a joined manual like that. Half of it is one way up, and then as you're flipping through, it rotates around to the other side for the second manual. But yeah, I know Jet Set Radio is a very sought after game. I don't know how interested or how much people would be chasing this particular like double-sided pack manual. No idea. But I thought, what a cool little curio. I'll grab it. Maybe I can use it on eBay to try and find it an owner who's searching for something like that. But yeah, they gave it to me for nothing, so that's fine. For a little Jet Set Radio manual, I wasn't going to turn that down. Another interesting one they had in there was this one, Dragon Ball Z Burst Limit for the 360. Again, just a loose manual, no game, looking for a home. So another one, hopefully I'll be able to match up with an owner who's chasing a manual. And they also had this, which was really interesting. This is a little... Not a novel. It's more of like a little information book / pamphlet that looks like it came with Xbox 360 magazine. Yes, free with Xbox 360 issue 38, and it is the history of Resident Evil. So when I saw that, I thought, oh, I've got to grab that for Scott for sure. So this is one that'll be getting sent down to him to go into his collection. But it looks like it goes through. It's just like a black and white sort of, it's very brown and aged. The camera is probably going to have a hard time showing you the condition. But it goes through a number of Resident Evil games all the way up until... Goes through the movies. Where do we get up to? Covers spin-off games. And it looks like it's Resident Evil 4. Yeah, that looks like the latest that it goes to, I think. Maybe Resident Evil 5. 4, I think. Anyway, there you go. And a bunch of spin-offs. So yeah, interesting. Just an interesting little thing, like, that goes through, like the synopsis of the game, introduces the game, talks about the characters, a bit about the setting, some notable weapons from the game, what the critical reception was, gives some little excerpts from reviews and things. Yeah, just a cool little book that I had never seen before, and I know that Scott would probably appreciate having for his collection. So there we go. The history of Resident Evil. All right, games. I have a number of games here to go through. The first was a bit of a heartbreak, actually, because this is the first one I saw, and I was like, yes, I want that for me. But when I opened it up, disappointment. And that was Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 3 for the Wii. Now, as soon as I saw that, I was like, yes, I know the Tenkaichi games are quite valuable, but honestly, I think I'd just like to have that for my shelf to have on the collection. But when I opened the case, sadness. So I got a case and a manual. It did actually have a disc in it, but it was a pirated copy of Tenkaichi 2 for the PlayStation 2 that was in the case. It was not very well... it was printed on top, but not very well printed. Really, really badly blurred and sun-faded. And yeah, just very obviously a fake counterfeit pirated disc. So I just let them know that, look, you're not going to want to sell that to somebody in this case. They're going to be quite disappointed, I'd imagine. So I just said, look, I would probably just throw that in the bin. And they said, well, do I want the case for nothing? And I said, yeah, sure. So I took the case and the manual. And yeah, I don't know. I'll try and see if I can maybe find a loose disc to go in it. I don't know how easy it's going to be to track down a loose disc for Tenkaichi 3 on the Wii. Not a very common game, I don't think. But who knows? Stranger things have happened. as is evidenced by the pile sitting next to me. So I'll hang on to that one for now and see if I can get it complete, and then it will probably find a home on my shelf if I can do so. But yeah, a freebie. All right. Here's a couple of games that aren't terribly valuable, but Scott did ask me if I could pick them up for him because I sent him a photo of what they had in this box. And after getting very upset and swearing at me and calling me every name under the sun because this is less than 24 hours after he's left, he gave me some games that he wanted in the box. The first of which is Dead or Alive 4 for the 360. Now this is not unfortunately complete. It's disc only, but I don't think it'll be terribly difficult to track down a manual for it if Scott wants to make it complete. There's a bit of a residue of a label on the front there that should come off fairly easily. Otherwise, it's in pretty good condition, just needs a good clean. The other one, find a spot for this, which also needs a good clean because there's a lot of label residue on this one, and that is Marvel Nemesis Rise of the Imperfects for the Xbox. And again, it's no manual, incomplete, just the disc on its own in the case. But that's the first of our Xbox pickups. Not a terribly valuable game, not a game I ever played either. So I'm not familiar with it, but Scott said it would be nice to have on his shelf, so I picked that one up for him as well. Okay, now we get into some slightly more valuable games, and this one I've already talked about in this very video, except this is the Xbox version of Soul Calibur 2. So they had that there, and this one is complete in manual, as we can see there, and in very good condition, which is always nice. Again, just needs a good clean. I don't think this is one that Scott is after. I've obviously got my GameCube one, which is the one that I used to own because it is the one I used to own. I didn't have it on the Xbox, so this is probably one I'll try and find a new home for on eBay. But yeah, just again, a top tier banger of a title that was just sitting in this Xbox lot. This one, as soon as I saw it, I was like, I'm going to have that for Scott straight away. It was one of the first things I grabbed out of the box, and that is Evil Dead, A Fistful of Boomstick for the Xbox. So Scott is a big Evil Dead fan. And yeah, as soon as I laid eyes on it, I knew that was going to be coming home with me for Scott. It is absolutely immaculate inside. It doesn't look like it's ever been opened. Manual and disc, both perfect condition. Case itself in absolutely perfect condition. Yeah, I mean, it's almost like, it almost looks brand new, to be perfectly honest. It doesn't even really need that much of a clean. It's got a bit of a dent on the cover, but other than that, like, that looks like it's sort of just come out of a shop. I don't know if you can see that. There's the dent there, reflecting in my light. Yeah, I know nothing about the game. I've never seen it, never played it. I don't have any affiliation with the movies. I'm not a horror guy. But I know Scott is a huge, huge fan of that particular property. I don't know if this is a game that he's played, but I'm sure he will appreciate having that on his shelf. All right, 3 games to go. Now we're getting into some value, some real value. So, I mean, Evil Dead's quite a valuable game. I think looking that one up, it's sort of like around the $40 mark on eBay that sells for. This next one is another one I've got no clue about, never seen it, never heard of it. I gave it a quick search on eBay just to see if there was any value in it. Turns out there was. I don't know why. I don't know if it's because it's super rare, if it was very well loved in the day. Who knows? But it is Phantom Crash for the Xbox. So this one does have a little bit of scuffing around the top of the label. But other than that, it's a bit dusty, needs a bit of a cleanup. It's not complete, unfortunately. It is just a disc in case. But I'm hoping I'll be able to find someone out there somewhere who is chasing a copy of Phantom Crash, because when I searched for this one, again, it was going for similar sort of money to Evil Dead or more. I don't know what makes this one so valuable. It looks like a mech combat game, which sucks because it's, if I had known it existed back in the day, that's sort of right up my alley. I would have really enjoyed trying this one out. But yeah, never heard of it. And there was a lot of like really obscure mech games back in the day, wasn't there? Like you had your Mech Warrior, you had your Armored Core, and then there were all these sort of like D tier mech games lurking around below them. Heavy Gear being the one that I played, that no one had ever heard of or knew anything about. This looks like another one of those. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments if this is like a really top tier, well loved property. But yeah, certainly not one I'd ever come across. So there we go, Phantom Crash for the Xbox. This next one goes for around, God, I want to say about the $60, $70 mark on eBay, somewhere around there. It is in incredible condition. Again, another one like Evil Dead that looks almost new, and that is Spawn Armageddon. Yeah, clearly someone who's just dumped their collection into a box and dumped it in a charity store bin with no real sort of research beforehand. But I'm hoping that if Scott wants this for his collection, it'll go to him. But if not, I'm hoping I'll be able to find that a home on eBay. Very, very good condition on the inside. Really, really good. The manual's slightly bent, but other than that, yeah, in great nick. Looks like it might have been a bit of a third-person action game based on Spawn. I don't know a lot about Spawn. I feel like I quite like Spawn. I should probably look into it a little bit more. There was that sort of period of time in sort of like the early 2000s, turn of the millennium sort of thing, where Spawn was, it was like a really cool thing to like. But it was never anything that I really got into at the time. But I think it's something might be worth going back and having a look at, actually. Seeing if I can pick up a comic or something like that. The movie is a bit of a cult classic, even though, I don't know, it doesn't look great. But a lot of those cult classics don't look great. And maybe that's, one that I need to check out as well. But yeah, I wasn't going to leave that there at all. So we'll see if we can find that at home, either on Scott's shelf or on somebody's shelf somewhere. And this last game, holy moly. I didn't realize that it was so valuable when I looked at it. I picked it up because of the property that it was based on and just set it aside because I know that it's a property that people like, Scott being one of them. But it wasn't until I did the research on eBay to have a look at like what these things sell for. This thing sells for up to and beyond sort of $200 on eBay. I don't think I've ever come across a game that is that valuable in a secondhand store before. I don't think I've come across a game brand new that's that valuable before, to be perfectly honest, that I've picked up. I think Ico that I scored at that Red Cross store, that would be the most valuable video game I've ever come across, and it's about an $80 game. So this far and away eclipses that. Yeah, just incredible. Again, a clear sign that someone just didn't understand what they had. And that is Godzilla Destroy All Monsters Melee. It looks awesome. I'll be honest with you. We just did a top 10 list very recently about our top 10 IPs that we think need a good game. And Godzilla, spoilers if you haven't watched it, was on my list. Having no idea that this ever existed. I mean, this is quite old, so I still think he's due for a comeback in a nice sort of, but like a nice modern reinvention. But this looks almost like the game I was kind of envisioning when I was describing what I would want out of a Godzilla game. So yeah, kind of miffed I didn't get to play this one back in the day either. Although I guess back then I wasn't really a huge Godzilla fan, so it probably would have been largely lost on me. So something interesting with this one is it's, again, gorgeous on the inside, absolutely beautiful condition. Little bit of like age and as you can see there, age and creasing on the cover of the manual, but the actual manual itself is in really, really good nick. Nice big chunky manual. But it also has, there was this little slip of paper, and I always get very excited when I open up a secondhand game and something like this is sitting on the inside, because it's like, what is this? Is this someone's like, are they notes from the game? Is it someone's, I don't know, water bill? I don't know. It could be anything. That's the thing. But it's actually like pages, 2 pages of cheat codes for the game itself. Just sort of like folded up and kept in the case. So that's fantastic. That is a fantastic find to have with that. So, the dilemma, you see, that has occurred with Godzilla Destroy All Monsters Melee is that when I scored it for what I scored it for, which was $5, by the way, this cost me. All of these games cost me $5 each. My intention was to put this up on eBay and resell it, find it a new home, and make a little bit of a profit so that I could put some money into the funds for, you know, getting games that I want to have on the shelf. However, I sent Scott a picture saying, look what I found. And he said, that's the one game. I think this was a trilogy of games, I believe he said. And it's the one that he's missing out of that collection. So this one will be going to Scott because I'm a wonderful friend and he should make sure he always remembers that. This will go to Scott to complete that little collection for his shelf because I'd way rather, any day of the week, I'd way rather give a game like this to a friend than try and hawk it off to a stranger. So that'll be going on Scott's shelf. Godzilla, Destroy All Monsters, Melee. But fuck me, what a find. What a find. That goes down as my absolute biggest secondhand store game find of my whole life. Not just while I've been doing this, but I think ever. I can't ever recall coming across a game this valuable, like a $200 game, just in a box of crap at a charity shop. So, yeah, just chuffed with that one. And hopefully that takes the sting out of Scott missing out on being there himself by being able to add this into his collection. So, yeah. Scott's ended up doing quite well out of this, really. We've got like 1, 2, 3, 4, potentially 5 games for him, for his shelf, out of that one stop in at that secondhand store. So, yeah, I will be putting that one back onto my list of stores to check out for games because I had no idea at all that they even held games there. So now that I've seen that, I'm going to have to go back in and have a look whenever I happen to be in the area. And it's only just around the corner from where I live, so even better. All right, so that's it for my secondhand store finds this week. It's going to be fucking hard to beat that pile, honestly. I don't know if it's ever going to be possible. But on the eBay side of things, I have just the one pickup this week, but it is another Grail game for me, crossed off my list. And this is like a top tier Grail game, one I was really eager to get a hold of. It's one of the first games I started looking for when I went on this whole game collecting journey. Not a difficult game to find. They're out there, they're available, but it was difficult to find one for an affordable price. I didn't realize that this was such a expensive title. I didn't know it was like, I don't know, I don't think it's particularly rare. But yeah, that surprised me. And that is Wave Race 64. So, if I had been sort of prepped ahead of time, I would have taken this out of its box protector, but I haven't done. I'll quickly do that now. So Wave Race 64 is probably one of my favorite games on the system. Like, I just love this game so much. Yeah, I played it so much as a kid. There we go. There's a little bit better look at it there without the glare. But like I said, surprisingly valuable game. Like, not top tier, you know, we're not talking Pokemon Stadium 2, Mario Party levels of cash here. But this one goes for sort of around $100 plus, which, you know, compared to the other stuff that I've been collecting for my shelf is a significant step up. I think Perfect Dark is probably the only game that's even come remotely close to that sort of money. But I did manage to get this one for a way less than that, and that's why it's ended up here with me. Otherwise, I'd still be looking, but I couldn't turn down. The deal that came through on this one. It's in really nice condition. There's a little bit of creasing on the front of the box, as you can see, just above the logo there. The sides look pretty good to me. One's a little bit creased. There's a little bit of a tear on the back corner, but you know me, I'm not a mint-in-box collector by any means, as long as it's all there and all in box. Now, this one does not have an insert, so I'm going to have to put an aftermarket insert into it, which is probably why it was a little bit cheaper, perhaps. But otherwise, it's all there. I've left it wrapped up in bubble wrap, but I'll unpack that in a moment and I'll show you. But it has its manual. There we go. Little bit of a crease on the front, but otherwise I've certainly got a lot worse manuals on the shelf. That's a pretty good one. And no pages missing, no tears, no nothing like that. Nice looking manual too, like really, you know, just emblematic of the game that it's for, I suppose. Yeah, Wave Race, man. Like, you've probably seen me, I did stream a game of it on the channel a little while back. I believe it was last year. And I couldn't believe how well that game holds up. It is still, it was one of my favorite arcade races on the system at the time. On a system that was spoiled for arcade races. This was by far and away probably my favorite. It'd be up there. But also, I couldn't believe that, like, how well it played now. Even how good it looked still, you know. There's the cartridge. It looks a little bit faded, but that's mostly because my lights are blaring it out a little bit. It's in very, very good nick. I think there's a tiny little tear on the back there, very small. But otherwise, yeah, really nice condition. Yeah, I love it. I love this game. I adore it. And I was so happy to find that it's still fun. It's still fun now. Adding the waves, like, it's such an obscure idea for a game, like jet ski racing, right? But adding the waves and the wave mechanics into what is a fairly rudimentary, straightforward racing game where you're just racing laps. There's no, like, you know, weapons or any weird stuff going on. It's how you handle the waves, right? That's who ultimately will win. Who can handle the waves the best? Because they throw things off so easily and so frequently where you're losing traction every, 10 meters or so sometimes. And how you handle that ultimately will decide the winner of Wave Race. And I adored it because it was so unlike anything else available at the time. Nothing else really compared to Wave Race that I played anyway. Like, I played, dozens of car races, arcade car races. You had your super speed races like F-Zero and Wipeout and that sort of thing. But there was nothing really quite like Wave Race. Only it was like itself. And I think only it was like itself. What a fucking sentence, Jamie. Fucking Oscar Wilde over here. It was great. I loved it. I absolutely adore it. It's definitely, like I said, one of my favorite games on the Nintendo 64. And now I've got it here in the collection, on the shelf. And yeah, I couldn't be happier with that because it's one of the top tier titles that I wanted to make sure I had sitting behind me here. So you'll be able to see that one just over my shoulder in future videos, displayed prominently, I imagine, for quite a long time. It's going to take a hell of a game to relegate this to the back shelf, Yeah. So there we go. Wave Race, an absolute banger. If you haven't played Wave Race, I would highly recommend you check it out on the Nintendo Switch Online expansion pass for the Nintendo 64. Yeah, you can play it on there. It's as good as it ever was. It doesn't really have any of the control issues that other Nintendo 64 games I find have had on Switch Online. It still plays just fine, plays how I remember it, and it's still just as fun as it ever was. So there we go. Wave Race 64, another retro Nintendo game for the shelf. And that is going to wrap up what has been a crazy, crazy week of pickups. Two more Grail games now that we can cross off the list, light them up as we move on to seeing if we can complete all of those Grail finds for the shelf behind me. Yeah. I'm wrapped. And I think, Scott, if you're watching, you should be fucking wrapped too, man. You've scored big time out of this one. So good. Yeah, really, really good week this week. Amazing. So, thank you so much for hanging out. If you have played any of these, if you can shed some light on any of those Xbox games that I haven't played and had an experience with, whether they are worth playing, if you think they would hold up, make sure you drop a comment and let me know. If you played Wave Race back in the day, please let me know. Nobody I knew owned or played Wave Race. No one gave a shit about it. So I was surprised, A, to see it show up on Switch Online, therefore it must have been semi-popular, and B, to find it, fetching a decent price and for there to be decent amounts of them on eBay. So it must be a fairly sought after game. So if you played it back in the day, make sure you let me know and let me know some of your memories from playing it. But yeah, that's it. I'm going to go and get out of here, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out. My name has been Jamie Dean, and as always, make sure you keep on side-scrolling. Take it easy.